So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this month's webcast. Now, for those of you who I haven't yet met, my name is Alice Brugger, and I am your brand new lead for our Customer Success Network webcast series. And I am also part of the customer success team at Slack and have been there for about the last 4 years or so. So really excited to join you all and take on this role. We've got a fantastic day and session ahead of us today. So we're going to kick off by talking about how to build a thriving customer community. And I'm really pleased to be welcoming Martina Curran, the Director of Customer Success at Salesforce. Now, Martina has an incredible breadth of experience and knowledge when it comes to customer success. I've definitely learned a lot already from the kind of initial conversations that we've had. And she has a lot of experience in building communities, having implemented an EMEA Trailblazer community at Salesforce. So in the edition of the webcast today, Martina's going to kick us off with really getting us thinking about what we mean by community, sharing some of her insights on her experience of creating one, and then also take a look at the impact that this can have. So overall, the reason that we wanted to focus today's conversation on this particular topic is that at the Customer Success Network, we really feel that community is more important now than ever before. I definitely feel this in my personal life, but I think we can also see it in our professional lives as well. From building customer communities, we know that this can present some really great opportunities around strengthening advocacy, gathering feedback, broadening connections. And this has really led us to wonder, how can we get started? What are the do's? What are the don'ts? And also what can we hope to achieve as well? So really looking forward to the conversation today. I know I'm going to be taking a load of notes, so don't worry, I will share those via Workplace afterwards. A quick call out, as always, we do want this session to be as interactive as possible. So if you do have questions that crop up, please drop them into the Q&A box or even just share them in the chat box as well. We're going to be pausing twice, once about halfway through, and then we'll definitely make time at the end for any more questions as well. One quick notice, we haven't been able to live stream this via the Workplace community today, but what I will do is share the recording and obviously the notes that we take throughout the session. So with that being said, it's my pleasure to hand over to Martina, and I think we just want to say thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Alice. The pleasure is all mine. I have to say, having spent over 10 years in customer success, the one element that I certainly have enjoyed the most is the concept of building a thriving community. So when you asked me to participate, I was a little bit giddy with excitement and trying to condense the knowledge within this short presentation today has been a challenge, but I hope that it does bring value. And as Alice has said to everyone on the line, I'd love this to be as interactive, as informal as we possibly can make it. Would love to hear your questions and hear your experiences on community so far. So with that said, just by way of quick introduction for those that may not know who I am, my name is Martina Curran. I have been working in IT for over 20 years at this stage. I'm making myself feel very old, but 10 of those years have been spent here at Salesforce, and all of that time is spent within the customer success group. So customer success, of course, is certainly a passion. It would need to be to spend that long in the one area. But on a personal level, I was asked to provide, a fun fact. For me, I'm a bit of a true crime fan, much to my husband and daughter's they're horrified when they see me yet again watching another crime drama. But listen, I use it to relax, which probably surprises some people. And on the more kind of formal professional side, just some certifications there, and they are prerequisite for anyone that has worked at Salesforce, to make sure that we understand our product to be able to bring that expertise to our customers. But again, links there to both LinkedIn and to Twitter if anyone would like to follow. I already see some notifications coming in, so I'll make sure to check them all out when we finish up the presentation today. A quick look at the agenda, and Alice has alluded to some of this already. We want to talk about community, the what and the why. You know, what is it and why it's so important, and then leading into the concept of creating a community. And I can talk, I suppose, from experience around the process that I certainly went through when setting up particular community groups on our Trailblazer community, and how that went, and things that were really important to be aware of. And then we're going to wrap things up with the impact. So what is the impact that I have certainly seen of having a thriving community, and how by really embracing the concept of nurturing that community and the role that a community manager can play, and the overall value that that can bring, not only to your company, but also to the customer and more broadly. So let's jump right in. And please do pop questions in the chat widget all the way through. I want to make sure, like I said, this is interactive as we can. But when we think of community, and there's nothing earth-shattering here, by definition, it really is having a group or unified body of people that share a common interest or common purpose. And, you know, really, when I think about the social networks today, we have Facebook, we have Instagram that we're all used to, but also the customer success network that you're part of today. This, again, is a community of individuals with a common interest. And today just happens to be overall community. But, you know, other community types exist, including user groups, special interest forums, and message boards, all of which we're likely to be very familiar with. But every single community, big or small, relies on people just embodying, you know, what it takes to be successful within a community. And I think what I was very aware of when I was putting together the content for today is that I do want it to be relatable to both big and small. You know, we have in Salesforce this big Trailblazer community, but if you're a smaller organization, you know, there's still learnings there that you can take forward. And why create a community? Well, it's not just the fact of having a kind of gathering space for people to kind of come to. It really is about the connection. And that's one of the really important lessons learned that I'll allude to later on is the bringing your as a community manager, bringing yourself to the community, making what is a virtual connection feel like a personal connection, and really building virtual relationships is what was crucial to making our community a success, because it really was all about building trust and loyalty. But it's not all, you know, it is about the brand recognition, but it is also about your customers feeling like they have a personal connection in some way, even though it is delivered through the virtual environment. You know, my first introduction to the concept of community came when I was a success manager, and you know, for the previous years, I had just a small portfolio of accounts, and I was able to interact with them quite easily. We then evolved our model, and the size of my portfolio, you know, was quite significant. And I needed a way that I could communicate with that portfolio of customers in the most scalable way, the most effective way, but a way that they could nearly learn from each other as well, which is when I introduced the first, what is now the EMEA Success Central community group, but back then it was Martina's customers community group, whereby I could have a single platform or channel to communicate out to that customer base around releases, around critical incidences, around things that they needed to be aware of, but also a channel by which they could ask questions. And it's not only me that's serving them up the answer, but the broader community of other customers within that group, and having them learn from each other. You know, that was the first introduction to the concept of community. And that evolved then in subsequent years. I think about 2 years later, I joined the programs team, our global programs team, where there was significant focus on success management at scale and how we could use our communities, our webinars, all of these digital channels by which to serve our customers. And that's where I was introduced into the broader concept of the Trailblazer community, because like it said, we needed a way to drive our customers' desired business outcomes. So, you know, they want revenue growth, customer engagement, increased innovation, and faster response times, but yet we are a limited capacity and limited number of resources to deliver success management at scale, you know, to that broad network of customer base, or that broad install base. So the idea behind the Trailblazer community, as it says here, is to provide the right expertise at the right time and to create the value that our customers need. So having joined the global programs team within Salesforce, I became responsible for our Premier Central group. So a dedicated group for customers who had a Premier success plan with Salesforce. And I was responsible for nurturing that group, getting customers engaged in that group, running associated webinars and driving the interaction through the community group. All the time trying to bring that value add and having our customers feel like they were part of something. And I have some of the things listed here in terms of certainly my focus as a community manager was to help customers resolve their problems by crowdsourcing the answer, to drive that peer-to-peer engagement, which is so critical when it comes to being able to scale your ability to serve your customers, and leveraging the wider Ohana expertise. So I'll talk in a couple of moments around the different roles within nurturing and driving engagement within a community. So yes, I was the community manager and I was responsible for the strategy, but that doesn't mean I needed to be the sole person that was fostering that community or sharing information and answering questions, that we could tap into subject matter experts across our Ohana and our ecosystem in general. Really trying to guide and inspire our customers and help customers where they were. So a customer, on a Monday morning has a particular problem with a particular feature or functionality, and being able to go into a community that is particularly for that product or that feature or functionality, and being able to get answers directly from the product team. That was what, really made a difference. And like I talked about the outcomes or what we were trying to drive from a customer perspective. And then on a Salesforce standpoint, it was reducing our cost to serve. It was, being able to allow our customers to self-serve in the environment of having that community. It was accelerated engagement within the platform itself, increased trust, hopefully. Certainly one of the things that stood out to me being a community manager was the need to create not a persona, because I think it's very important that you bring your authentic self, but a personality, and bringing your own individual personality to a group or to a community. And I always remember the first time going to Dreamforce after I was managing the Premier Central Community Group for about 6 to 8 months at this stage, and being recognized on the street by customers who were part of that group because they recognized my picture from the community group and talking like they knew me. I was always astounded by that. And it felt like there was a trusted relationship there. And also the final element is that case deflection. So what questions can we drive crowdsource solutions to and answers to through the community, rather than having to go through tech support, particularly for our standard customers who don't have the same SLAs and response times. But for those, I suppose, that don't know much about the Trailblazer community itself, there's kind of 2 different elements to it. There is the online community itself, where we have featured groups. We have groups that are run by the customer success group and CSG within Salesforce, and we have groups run by the product teams, by success managers today who want to engage with their customers. We have groups run by MVPs who are customers themselves. And really it is about just creating that overall forum by which they can interact and build that peer-to-peer network that really is invaluable. But some latest stats, around 2 million users on that Trailblazer community today, over 800,000, Q&A, questions and answers, and 4 million monthly page views. So this is, I suppose, this is community on steroids. But I think certainly the messaging I want you to take away today is that this is future state. There's still learnings from how we started out, when we started out at a very small scale, that you can take forward to build and nurture your own communities. An important element of the community group as well is these customer-led groups, which I alluded to. Pre-COVID, we had in-person user groups, in cities and countries around the globe that are run by customers for customers. And each of those user groups would have an associated Trailblazer community. Now, this has obviously all gone online, but at one stage there's about 400 plus recurring monthly meetings that are happening within those groups today. So I want to quickly move on then to talking about, I suppose, the process that I certainly went through when I joined the global programs team. I'd had the experience of creating a community that was very specific to an immediate need that I had to service my portfolio of customers, to go into knowing that I needed to create a community that was certainly going to be a lot bigger and that needed a defined strategy around. And with that, I certainly leaned in, and kudos and shout out to the Community Roundtable. Myself and the other community managers in the programs team at the time really did embrace this methodology and framework that they provide to make sure we had an answer to every single one of these bullet points. So the strategy, how your community objectives are going to be defined and linked to the overall strategy. So why are you creating the group in the first place? Do you have leadership influence within the community? Do you have sponsorship and buy-in from your own leadership? The culture. So what are the norms and the level of community participation that you want to be able to achieve? Community management. So resources dedicated to managing a productive community. And I'll talk a little bit more, and I'll dive deeper into that, because this was one of the really kind of eye-opening things for me, is that when I thought of community, I thought, oh, you just need a community manager and that would be it. But there's a lot of different roles that individuals can play when it comes to community management. Something that really stood out to me was the need for content and programming. So I couldn't just have my community and posting in it once, twice a week and hoping that customers would engage with that content. We ended up having a strategy or a plan that included a series of webinars, running the Q&A for those webinars through the community group, having special guests involved, having our MVP community to do guest slots on the community where they would share their top tips, Thursday top tips or something like that, if memory serves me correctly, or Feedback Friday, all those things that, encouraged the interaction, so that the community itself could be self-serving. We also needed to make sure we had policy and governance in place. So what are the guidelines that we're going to work within and the processes that are going to define that? And then from a tools perspective, the infrastructure. For us, it was pretty straightforward. We were using our own community's product, but what is the infrastructure that you need to be able to enable activity, engagement, and the overall behaviors that you want to drive within the community itself? And the other area that we're going to talk about later in the second half of the call is metrics and measurements. So how do you measure the community health and the progress against the goals that you've defined as part of your overall strategy? So before we take a break for some Q&A, this for me, as I talked about in terms of community management role, was a real eye-opener when it came to developing that Premier Central group, and that it didn't all just have to land on me, and it couldn't, because if I was the only one that was driving and nurturing that community, it wasn't going to be successful. So, we talk about allies, contributors, SMEs, the group manager, community manager themselves, and who's going to own the strategy and the center of excellence around that community. Now, for smaller organizations, the community manager, strategy, and COE could be the same person. For us, it wasn't, but you can see how it would all work together and what they're responsible for. So particularly within CSG, we saw everyone as an ally. Even because our success managers with dedicated accounts, send your customer to the community to make sure, particularly if they're Premier and the group I was involved in, to get answers to their questions, to attend the tech hours that we were running on a particular product or feature, because they knew that was something that they had talked to them about recently. Contributors could be anyone from someone that wanted to share an upcoming event, piece of content, a knowledge article. We even got tech support involved, identifying what were the top trending cases, and to encourage case deflection, sharing knowledge articles about those particular topics directly in the community itself. Obviously, to keep people interested, it is that answering their questions, redirecting their questions, calling in experts, looping in a product manager onto a product specific question. And then your role as a community manager is to nurture, it is to update, it is to make sure that you're driving that collaboration and that engagement within the group. And then in our instance, we did have that programs team to run the overall strategy. So we had a series of different groups that CSG were running and owning. So it made sense that we made sure to have the same governance and policies and procedures in place in terms of how we executed against them. So the experience would be seamless as customers moved from one group to another. I've talked a lot, so we are going to take a moment. Alice, any questions that have been coming in?
Yes, so we've got one from Lulu, and she's asking, how do you make sure that users don't keep asking the same questions?
Yes, great question. So we did this in a number of ways, and we would certainly group questions together. We use topics, which is a feature within the community. We would do a recap on a Friday before we wrapped up on the day of all kind of what were the top trending questions and the answers to those, and they were sent actually in the digest to all our community members at the end of the week, so they could consume it in that way. And then as a community manager, on some occasions, it was literally looping that question back to where it was asked before and answered. So it was just linking that together, and again hopefully through the topics feature, or typically just a hashtag feature that we had within the Trailblazer community.
I love that idea of like a roundup, so that you're kind of knowing what's top of mind, being able to share it proactively. I think that's great.
Today they call it picks from the pack.
Very nice. I like the branding. I think we all need to.
I know. So Blaze is sitting over my shoulder, so that's our mascot for customer success. So
great. Well, we've got a couple of other questions that have come through. One from Isabel, who wants to know, what would be your suggestion for building a community for one-to-many or sort of low-touch customers? Is there a particular segmentation you would be looking at first, besides sort of looking at healthy customers?
Yeah, I think segmentation is always important, and that comes back to the strategy around why you're creating that group in the first place. What is it? What's the gap you're trying to bridge? So, for example, I've seen community groups being created where we've had, like, we know there's a feature going end of life, and we want to make sure that we're specifically targeting that subset of customers to make sure they have one central place to go to find all the information they need, plus also ask questions if they're struggling with the end of life notification. So definitely understanding your customer base and segmenting in a way that is, where are you going to get bang for your buck, basically? Where is the biggest impact you can bring? Is it within a particular segment? For us, I know within Premier, we want to make sure that customers with a Premier Success Plan were actually getting value from that, and it was seen as a value add that they had this channel by which they could easily communicate. And for us, we did that because we were constantly hearing that customers weren't seeing the value in Premier. So we wanted to make sure that they had a channel by which they could voice those concerns. They could get access to someone directly within Salesforce, who would continually drive that information and give them what they needed. and encourage them to consume the different elements of their Premier Success Plan in a recurring basis. I hope that has addressed the question, Isabel, but let me know. I'm always happy to connect, and even after we wrap up today, feel free to outreach, LinkedIn or however you want to do it. But yeah, I always kind of take it back to what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And then I use that as the basis to, okay, how many customers, what's my total addressable market in terms of that particular challenge?
And I think Daisy has a potentially related question, particularly in talking about sort of Premier customers and different segmentation. So Daisy's question is, do you differentiate access to communities based upon the tier of service of that particular client or customer?
Great question. So within our Trailblazer communities is today, customers have to log in. So they'll use their Salesforce login credentials to access the groups, but that kind of gives them access to the broader Trailblazer community group. When it comes to our Premier Central group, obviously we only wanted customers who had a Premier Success Plan part of that group. So we made that private. And actually customers had to either request access to it, and I would then validate yes or no, you're a Premier customer, and admit you in, or we would do a proactive outreach to Premier customers who we knew weren't part of the group already, encouraging them to join.
And I guess that sort of reinforced the value add of being part of that community and being a Premier customer as well.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great.
And apologies, you hear my dog barking in the background. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. The joys of working from home for the last year. So 2 more questions and then we'll jump back into it. So Isabel again has another question, interesting one around, should a community live under support, under success, or under marketing?
Listen, I think that what has worked, I can only talk from experience, what has worked for us is that it actually has been part of success. And the reason being is that I saw success as being the bridge between tech support, product, marketing. So yes, if you think back to the different roles that people can play within community management, our SMEs were, tech support reps, and they were product managers. They were people from marketing who wanted to share an upcoming event to drive attendance and registration, but allowed us to be kind of the gatekeeper to make sure that because whatever we post in the group needs to be relevant for that customers. We don't want to spam people. We don't want to spam our customers. We wanted to make sure that it was relevant for the reason why they joined this particular group was these reasons. And then obviously I had my own strategy as to what I was trying to achieve within the group. So it just meant that as tech support, product and marketing were looking to kind of share information in that group, I was kind of the gatekeeper to say, well, this isn't actually really relevant for this group of customers, because the premise or the goal of this group is X, Y, Z. But I do recommend you maybe post it elsewhere. So I found that it has worked well. And I think that certainly within customer success, there is that. For us, it's the trusted advisor. They see us as a trusted advisor, in that our want and desire for them is to be successful as a customer, using what they have. So I hope that we were able to do that, and that's what I certainly have seen with success, owning it.
Great. So final question from Adrian. How do we encourage participation from senior stakeholders within a customer's business rather than just more technical profiles?
Listen, it comes down to your strategy and your content strategy. I know for a while within the Premier Central group, we ran a thought leadership segment, once a month, that was more relevant to that type of persona or that type of role. So really it comes down to what is their role in the community, and how are you going to service their need and what's important to them.
Yeah, I think the thought leadership piece is really interesting, because that's what they're going to be thinking about and talking about anyway.
Yeah. And I am going to put my headset in because if the dog is annoying me, I'm sure he's annoying everyone else. So bear with me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay.
That is it. Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better. I have been compared to Princess Leia when I wear these with this headset. So, okay, okay to move on, Alice. Great. Okay. Let's move on then to talk about the overall impact, and certainly what I can talk from experience in terms of what we have seen. And the first element of that is around the impact of that nurturing, and which is predominantly the job of someone in community management or the community owner. But what is very evident is that communities don't run themselves. You know, you have to make them a destination for driving awareness and making sure that they get what they came for when they actually visit. And again, this ties back to the strategy and really understanding what's the business objective internally of creating this group? What is the gap I'm trying to bridge? And where's the value from the customer's perspective? And making sure that with each visit that a customer has to the group, I'm delivering on what I've set the expectations to be. But anytime someone engages in the community, whether it's to share content or resources or announce an upcoming event or webinar, or hopefully to answer questions, then that adds value to all of the members who visit and view the feed within the group. And that's why when I talked about the different roles earlier, the more people, even internally, that you can get to interact, and even though you're the face of the community group, you know, they get to, I remember there was a particular technical expert that I used to feature every second Thursday. And it was like just his top tips from James. And he would run a webinar every now and again, and people got to know him and interact with him personally. And then, you know, even start, you know, at mentioning him directly in questions they were posting into the group. So like the more you define your strategy, your purpose, and then have a content plan to be able to deliver against that. So it's constantly, when a customer visits a community group, the worst thing would be to see that there's been no interaction within this group in the last 2 weeks. You know, what are we going to do every week? What are the recurring things that we do every day, every week, every month? Whether it is that digest at the end of the week, whether it's our features in terms of top leadership, tech Thursdays, you know, top tips Thursday, you know, whatever it is, that there's something that's interactive for them to engage with. And it is really about kind of building an audience within the community. I always remember someone saying that, you know, there was a crucial point by which the community itself becomes more self-serving. And it actually feeds off, the members feed off each other. And then it's back to that kind of peer-to-peer networking piece. As a customer was asking a question, it was when another customer saw that, they're like, oh, that's something that we'd be interested in as well. And they would tag and follow the conversation, or it would cause them to think about, you know, that customer is asking about this particular feature. That's something that we don't have. Is that something we should be exploring as well? So by seeing the questions that other customers were asking was driving the thought process for the entire group. But just some things that we noted here around making that the destination for our customers, the self-serve experience. You know, I think if COVID has taught us anything, is the importance of online and be able to this feeling of community online in a very virtual environment, and allowing our customers to self-serve when they want to. Because, you know, sometimes, you know, even when I've you know, something has stopped working here at home, I'd rather just Google, you know, a video on how to fix it rather than calling up the tech support desk for that particular product. But again, around the increase in engagement and trust. And it is so important that there is that trust there, that if the community itself understand that your reason for being is, and you set that out in terms of, you know, what your vision for the group as well. So when they join the group, they're already bought in to the agenda that you have. And then for us within the customer success group, it was that reach. We had no way of interacting with those thousands and thousands of customers on a one-to-one level. We needed a way to be able to extend our reach through these scale platforms and channels. And the Trailblazer community was just one of those. At a numbers level, because I know people like numbers, how when we talk about that measurement and impact, when it came to the community engagement, and these are if we compare customers who were engaging in the community versus those that weren't. So for customers who were engaging in the community, there was 33% higher adoption against the metrics that we were using internally to track that. 3 times lower attrition. So as a subscription business, renewal is important. 2.5 times more pipeline. So engaged customers become sticky, if that's a term. As they learn and grow and be enabled and empowered around, in our case, Salesforce and its features and what we were trying to achieve, and the transformational side of that they took within their own businesses, and that just encouraged their account base to grow. And then the size of actually deals that we were closing with customers that were engaging was actually 2 times greater than those that weren't. In terms of our reach, because that was something that as we all try to strive towards a scale way to do this, of our top communities, those that were managed particularly by the customer success group, we touched over 150,000 members from across 64,000 accounts. So you can imagine how many man hours that would take if you were doing that one-to-one and you had a dedicated success manager who was trying to be all things to all people, where in a community you have different roles to play. And you didn't need to be an expert on everything, because you could just pull in the expert to answer particular questions at any moment in time in a more efficient and a faster way. But it also drove stronger alignment across not only the groups that were run by the customer success group, but our Ask the Expert groups and our product specific groups. So every group within the Trailblazer, all of our products are represented within the Trailblazer community. So if you had something that was product specific, and they're actually owned and managed by the product managers themselves. So the people who are actually, building the roadmap around what features and how their feature will evolve release over release. And at Salesforce, you're aware that we have three releases every year. So they're run by the product team. So, where else could you get that level of access to someone who's, owns the product, to be able to have a voice and share your experiences, good or bad, around how you're using their particular feature today, what's working, what's not working, and hopefully being able to influence the overall roadmap for that feature in future releases. So pretty impressive metrics and measures that came with that. In terms of overall lessons learned, this was the one that immediately came to mind when Alice suggested I add in this slide. Build it and they will come is not applicable to the community. You can't just create a group and expect customers to find you first and join. You need to be very deliberate. And again, it comes back to that strategy piece. What is my total addressable market? Who do I want to see in my group, and what is the problem I'm trying to solve? So be very deliberate about that, and be very aware that it does take work and investment of your time to get the right customers into your community in the first place. Personality, as I mentioned to you after that first trip to Dreamforce, that was very evident to me how having your picture as a community owner and how you interact with that group on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, people felt like they knew you, and they felt that connection, which I think is really important. Particularly, you want them to be able to share the good and the bad. When they have feedback, constructive feedback is equally as important, and trusting you as a community manager that you'll take that, you'll take that to the attention of whoever's, you need to take it to the attention of, or you'll direct it to the most appropriate place. I've referred to it a couple of different times, but having a content and engagement strategy. How am I going to engage every day? What are the what are the things that I'm going to do every day? What are the things that I do once a week? The digest, for example. What are the things that I want to do once a month? What are the features that become synonymous with the Premier Central group? So the Tech Thursdays, the Feedback Fridays, all of those things. And the roles. So I referred to this earlier in terms of our allies, our contributors, our SMEs, the community management piece itself, and also the strategy and the Centre of Excellence owners. So it takes a village, and I think that's very relevant when it comes to the community. But don't let that put you off either. I think typing this in, I was like, okay, but maybe people will think that you need to have all of this kind of, hundreds of people, tens of hundreds of people involved to make a community successful. In the beginning, you as a community manager may own 3 or 4 of those roles. But you build from there. You get to know your audience, you get to know what they want, you get to know what their interests are, and you align your content strategy to match that. And then you expand out and you understand how other key stakeholders from across your organization can influence that and play a role. So yes, it takes a village, but again, you start from what makes most sense for your organization at this moment in time, and you build on that. And then the final thing is the community champion. So I haven't actually mentioned this yet, particularly and it wasn't just within my group. We did it again as a part of a Centre of Excellence strategy across the groups that we ran within the customer success group. We wanted to identify customers who we could tell were very active across the community, not necessarily just within your group, but they're active across the community, different groups. You can see because we could track all of this. You could see how many times they're commenting, they're actually posting a comment themselves, how many times they're commenting on an existing post, how many groups they're a member of. And we wanted to encourage them to be an extension of us when it comes to driving the engagement. So a natural place for us to start to look at who our community champions would be our MVP community. So they are Salesforce customers, consultants, that are very active across a number of different channels, not just within the Trailblazer community, where they're I hesitate to use blazing a trail or becoming a trailblazer, but they are advocates of Salesforce and the product right across a number of different platforms. So we identify those, we ask them would they be interested in becoming a community champion. We set out a role for them in terms of, our ask is that you will help us to address any questions that come in, help to redirect where you see fit, use the relationships that they have, as they come across really useful content, cross-share it into the relevant groups. And at one stage, I think when I wrapped up in that programs team, I think we had like a community champion team just specific for my own group of around 20 customers. So we're all, we all, had the same goal in terms of helping our customers to self-serve, to be successful, and to use the community in the most effective way. So I've talked a lot. The dog has stopped barking. It's not just the headset, but I'm going to pause again and use the rest of the time for questions.
Perfect. Well, we've already got one through from Rona all about how to sustain engagement. So Rona says we've had a few Feedback Friday Zoom sessions, which have been great, but it isn't leading customers to actually convert into posting into the community. So the question is around how you engage posts after these sessions. How do you encourage them? Are you actually posting on behalf of customers based on the discussion, or how do you generate that engagement after the Zoom meetings?
Great question. So, and I have a particular example that I can experience that I can reference. So again, in a bid to drive that engagement within our group, when we were running webinars, at the beginning of the webinar, we would say, we encourage you to post your questions into the Premier Central group, because that was the topic of the conversation, or that was the benefit or the value add, with the messaging that, we can post it in the chat within the webinar, but you're the only one that's going to benefit from that. Let's share this with the broader ecosystem. It did take some time for customers to become familiar with that, and it was very much that when you started the webinar, you share the link. You have the customers with the webinar on one screen and the community on the other screen, so they could kind of toggle between the two. That it was slow to get started, but once we got it, it worked. Initially, as customers continued to post in the webinar chat platform, we would actually share them on the community, mention them and say, you asked this particular question, let's crowdsource your answer, or here's your answer. We would also share our recordings and our content from any of the sessions that we ran within the community group as well. It really is about thinking about every angle and encouraging them to do so. Any questions that we wouldn't get to address live on air, we would say we're going to post them in the community group, and we'll mention you directly, and you can follow up there as we get the answers to your questions. So again, it's just about being very deliberate, and always, even though when customers kind of pull against you a little bit and want to revert back to what they're most comfortable with, it really is selling the value of having your question in the group and having more than just the person that's delivering the webinar give you the answer, but having it crowdsourced. So you're getting a more enriched answer, plus the question and answer that you've question you've posed and the answers you've gotten can help other customers along the way. So kind of making it a no-brainer. When we ran webinars, we actually when it got to the Q&A section at the end, we would pull up the community and we'd read out the questions directly from the community thread. I might have a buddy on the webinar with me who's been actively answering the questions, so we could go through them one by one, and that certainly encouraged, because we would default to there first. So we'd say, okay, let's see what questions we have in the community, and then only go to the chat when when that ran out. And it did take a bit of a carrot approach as well. So I know on a particular webinar, it was like, okay, the first 10 people to ask their question on the community group will be put into a draw for a bit of swag, or, it's just about being clever, and at the end of the day, it could be like a pen and a mouse mat, but it's still, that whole gamification, it did encourage them to do so. So hopefully that has given you some ideas.
Yeah, it's certainly given me some ideas, even in the context of the Customer Success Network. I love the idea of sharing the Q&A that we're having today back into the community on Workplace and having that discussion go on. So I've made sure to make a note of all the questions, and I will share a summary of things afterwards. So yeah, I think that's definitely really useful. So I actually have one question which I wanted to ask, and then we'll leave a couple of minutes for any other questions that come up. So you've talked a lot about the Premier customers and the community that you're working with. I'd be really interested to hear, in terms of building connection, it sounds like there was a really strong connection built in that community, and it was all done remote before you then sort of met at Dreamforce. What are some of the ways in which you were able to build that community in the context of being remote? What really worked well?
For me, it was allowing my personality to be experienced within the chat, my posts. So not getting very, speaking in my own language. When I was posting, speaking, typing as I would speak naturally. So it felt very authentic. The very first thing that we did was we all got our photos taken, and the photo that you've actually used on the registration page, coincidentally enough, was taken as my Chatter profile picture in the Premier Central community group. So it's putting a face to the name. It was, me being Irish, but obviously the group was global. So playing on some of that in terms of St. Patrick's Day and Valentine's, and, leaning into just coming across as very human at the end of the day, and wanting them to feel that you're there as a support, even though, all they see is your picture, but and then they may hear you speaking when you're doing a webinar. I always remember someone saying to me, when you're delivering a webinar, imagine your audience is sitting with you, you know, in a sitting room, all on couches, and you're just that very casual conversation, because even though they can't see you, you know, back then there was no cameras on or anything at that stage, but they can hear it in your voice. They can hear how interested you are, how engaged you are. You know, are you just reading from a script, and are you just here to check the box, or are you genuinely here because you're passionate about a particular topic, or you know, or area of interest in general?
Yeah, I love that. I love the thought of, you know, typing in the way that you would speak. I think that's a really good tip to think about.
Yeah, and listen, I think customers come to expect, like, Salesforce, that you know, there's marketing spin and, you know, messaging, and I would never lead in that way in terms of my conversations. You know, you want it to feel human, and you know, it's not a bot that's in behind these chatter posts that are going out within the community, that it is actually a person who's trying to connect on a human level, and that certainly seems to have worked.
Yeah. Okay, so we have 2 more questions, which I think should probably take us up to the top. Online forums and webinars. And then secondly, when beginning a community program, particularly at a smaller organization, how do you consider the different phases of the customer lifecycle? So whether they're in their onboarding stage or they're at the point of renewal.
Yeah, I lost your audio for a second, so I missed the first part of the question. So I'll get you to recap that, if that's okay. And then I heard the bit about the life cycle.
All good, yeah. So the first part was just what else are you doing outside of the online forums and webinars as part of the community?
Okay, so certainly what we did outside of the online community was link it in with our webinars and our in-person events as well. So within, obviously, at Dreamforce, we go, any of our kind of CSG managed groups would have a get together, you know, when people congregated in San Francisco once a year. But even at a more local level, you know, within those user groups, which are the customer-led groups, which were in person pre-COVID, you know, we would be invited along to participate in that, and then we would encourage customers back to the community again. So we did try to make sure that there was a connectedness. So any opportunity, whether it was a webinar, event, a blog post, that we would it all needed to have that steel thread running through it that would always lead you back to the community as being the destination. And these were just kind of features and featured events along the way. On the life cycle piece, which makes me smile, because my role today is really looking at our onboarding experience for customers, you know, how we onboard our customers within that first 100 days. And already I'm thinking about getting back into the community, and as we have cohorts of customers that are of a similar industry, similar size, you know, do we allow them to, or create this community for them, so that we can guide them through their first 100 days as a cohort, so they continue to learn from each other, and do that in a very kind of programmatic way. But then even in the very early days, you know, I know I managed the Premier group, but at the time I had colleagues who were managing Getting Started group, which was for those net new customers, and then more that was around once they graduated from that onboarding lifecycle phase. It was really redirecting them to the product specific groups that were applicable to them. So whereas the Getting Started group was, you know, whether you were Marketing Cloud, Service Cloud, you know, Sales Cloud, Pardot, it didn't matter. You know, everyone was kind of directed to the Getting Started group. But once you got past your graduation phase, then okay, now you need to go deeper in your particular product or cloud, because the Getting Started was more about here's what you need to know about Salesforce, and here's what you need to know about the customer success group, how you access resources, what are the key groups that we recommend for a customer of your type, what are the key resources that you need to be aware of, how do you request for help. So that was the kind of getting started piece. So we got them to a certain stage, and then it was, okay, now you've gotten to this, you know everything you need to know, go now and join the marketing cloud group, or the product, or the Pardot group, or the sales or service groups, so that you have a unified collection of customers who were all interested in the same topic or the same features and functionality in the broader cloud that was relevant to them. So that was how we would kind of transition them. Once they got what they needed from their initial introduction, then they would move into their product specific groups.
Great. Yeah, I think loads of really useful tips there, and yeah, good to hear that it relates to the context of your new role and sort of what's top of mind for you as well.
Yeah.
Cool. So we have 2 minutes left, and we
Sorry, Alice, I lost audio again there just as you asked the question. I'm not sure whether it's me. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sure. So how do you manage expectations about a response to questions or posts?
Yeah, we're very deliberate about that. And actually within the community itself, there's what we call the left navigation bar, where it sets out the vision for the group and what you can expect. At the time, I was in a very fortunate position where that was my role. My role was community management and owning the content and strategy around that. So, oh, I'm not sure. Is it me?
It cut out slightly. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, keep going.
Yeah. So I was in the kind of favorable position of being able to respond, every day. But I think it is very important point to make sure that there is an expectation there that if questions are coming in, because there's nothing worse than a customer putting a question in and not getting a response for a week. That means they will not post another question. So, but if they know that, the questions are viewed on a weekly basis, on this date, expect a response at this particular time, then they know what they're getting into.
Great. Well, I think we are just about at time. So firstly, Martina, thank you so much. I know I have got so many insights and tips from this conversation. I know our audience will have as well. So thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, we'll definitely share kind of your LinkedIn details afterwards for anyone to get in touch. And for all of the audience, thank you. Thank you for your thoughtful questions as well. We'll send a wrap up into Workplace after the close today.
Great, and thank you, Alice. I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I know I talk a lot, particularly about areas and topics that I'm passionate about, but I hope that it was useful.
It was fantastic. So thank you so much, honestly. Well,
thanks, everyone.
Have a lovely evening. Bye.